take it.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you all so much for braving the cold and coming out tonight. My name is Amali and I'm the events director here at Books Are Magic. We are so excited to have Samantha Allen and Sarah Burke with us tonight to celebrate the launch of Samantha's newest novel, Roland Rogers Isn't Dead Yet, a story of an unlikely romance between ghostwriter and, well, ghost. But before you get started, I just have a few logistics to go over, then I'm going to introduce our wonderful guests, and then we're going to dive right in. So first off, we will be doing a hand-raised audience Q&A towards the end of the discussion, so please start thinking of questions to ask about the book and hold on to them. After the talk tonight, Samantha will be around to sign and personalize your books at the alcove next to where you checked in. We'll let you know where and when to start lining up for that. And finally, if you're joining us virtually on the YouTube live stream, we would love to encourage you to buy a copy of Roland Rogers Isn't Dead Yet online using the link in the live stream description. Okay, so first I get to introduce Samantha Allen, who is the author of Patricia Wants to Cuddle and the Lambda Literary Award finalist, Real Queer America, LGBT Stories from Red States, and the GLAAD award-winning journalist. Samantha's writing has been published by the New York Times, Rolling Stone, CNN.com, and more. And as I mentioned earlier, Sarah Burke joins Samantha in conversation tonight. Sarah is the editor-in-chief of Them. Sarah has helped produce numerous award-winning projects, including the Gender Spectrum Collection, an award-winning stock photo library featuring trans and non-binary models, and Transnational, a Peabody and GLAAD award-winning docuseries about transgender rights around the world. That's all for me. Please join me in giving Samantha and Sarah a very warm welcome.
Hello, Brooklyn. I love to ask everyone in Brooklyn a few questions, and I've never gotten the chance to do it with this many people before. Raise your hand and keep your hand raised if you are a DJ. Even like on an amateur level, you've downloaded DJ software, you've purchased a piece of DJ equipment, you've taken a class. 0 DJs? Whoa. Okay.
I want you to know we did this in Dime Square and that was not the reaction.
Okay, second question. You have lived with, dated, or married a DJ?
Okay.
For the live stream viewers, we're up to like a quarter of the room. And last question, you aspire to one day become a DJ?
Don't be shy.
We've got a few more hands.
A few honest people in
We
the
got
room.
to about a third by the end. I was honestly thinking we would get to 100%.
This is a literary crowd.
Yeah. You all read too many books.
Get out there and start DJing.
This is the portion of the evening where I bring the coolest person I can find in a city, and then she has to sit there and smile politely while I read to you. But we'll hear more from Sarah in a moment. I want to talk to you about Roland Rogers Isn't Dead Yet. I want to read you a really fun section, but unfortunately that really fun section requires a little bit of preamble. So by way of introduction to the book, Roland Rogers, for me, stems from a thought experiment born out of, editing, co-writing things, doing celebrity profiles, where I was like, in what universe would one of the beautiful, pretty people of the world talk to me, a struggling ex-Mormon author? And I was like, I know, if they were dead and no longer had their body. And so I created Roland Rogers. He's a Hollywood movie star, 50 years old. He got his start on a hospital drama called Life or Death. Then he was in a bunch of big box office successes, and lately he's been starring in an action franchise called Crash Street, which is sort of like a Fast and the Furious style thing. His character's name is Crag Dynamite, which will become relevant, and his father is played by Nick Nolte, and his father's name is Tad Dynamite. And then, Roland has like the charisma of George Clooney, the agelessness of Paul Rudd, and like the masculine energy of Vin Diesel all rolled into one. But unfortunately, at the start of the novel, we find out Roland is dead. And after he dies, he wakes up in his Malibu mansion and sort of slowly pieces together that he's an invisible ball about as big around as a toy basketball made entirely of electricity. So he starts figuring out how to wriggle his way into appliances and eventually figures out he can send an email. And that's how he procures a ghostwriter for himself, Adam Gallagher, a struggling ex-Mormon novelist whose breakout 2010 book was called Salt Lake City Sodomite. And Adam thinks it's going to be his big break. But unfortunately, he doesn't realize, at least at the start, that Roland is dead. So in the portion that I'm going to read to you, Adam and Roland have kind of developed more of a rapport after some bumps. Adam has accepted that Roland is dead. Roland mostly speaks to Adam at this point in the book out of a Bluetooth shower speaker that Adam wears around his neck for convenience. And Roland has discovered that when Adam eats things or drinks things, he has ecstatic, orgasmic, like reveries that are very thrilling for him, but he hasn't really broached that subject with Adam yet. And so in the scene that I'm going to read to you, first from Adam's perspective, and then we'll have a little bit at the end from Roland's perspective. Adam and Roland are taking a night off from writing to watch Crash Street 6 in Roland's screening room. And we're going to hear Roland kind of admit to Adam the effects that Adam's consumption has on him. That was an okay explanation, I thought. That was like,
was
no,
really
we don't
good.
need to clap that yet. But it's complicated to set all that up in the book. So, but I really like this section. I wanted to read it tonight. Well, that line was homophobic, I tell Roland, taking a sip of the whiskey sour I mixed for this viewing. I even garnished it with a maraschino cherry from his pantry, a Luxardo, a brand I've never bought at home because a jar costs $30 at Whole Foods. We're in the private screening room in Roland's wing, midway through Crash Street 6, when we reach the infamous Tad Dynamite death scene that Roland hyped up in our last interview. He and Nick Nolte both seem to be tripping over the ham-fisted dialogue, but Roland's performance has somehow imbued the scene with genuine emotion. Even I'm getting a little misty-eyed as Cragg watches Tad steer his tank straight into the titanium wall. As promised, Roland doesn't cry, but he convincingly twists his face in agony as Nick Nolte becomes a mushroom cloud. Homophobic? Roland asks. You mean the line about shoving it up General Firestorm's ass? I'm still getting used to his voice emanating from my chest, but there's a comfort to being able to crane my neck down and ask, you there? It's like having a Tamagotchi that can think and feel and talk back to me. The dream of every lonely 90s kid. Yeah, I confirm. What year is this one from again? It feels like a line straight out of 2009. I mean, it's not like he doesn't deserve to have a bomb shoved inside him, Roland rebuts. Firestorm's trying to inject a tasteless, odorless poison into Europe's water supply, remember? Speaking of poison, these films go down a lot easier when you're sitting in a plush leather armchair with a drink in your hand. Yes, it's movies like Crash Street that are destroying the written word, turning my craft into a mere afterthought for special effects. But sometimes it can be fun to empty your head and watch things explode. But even after a long day of writing, I'm trying to parse the plot mechanics. How did he tap into all of Europe's water again? I ask him. It's not like every country is using the same reservoir. Don't think about this shit too hard, Adam, Roland says. What you need to know is that Firestorm is a bad, bad dude. Yes, I think that was clear when he ran over a child's lemonade stand in his Hummer. Laughter comes crackling through the speaker, but Roland's laughter might as well be a drug. As soon as it stops, you would do anything in your power to bring it back. Vexing though he may be, and he has truly tested my patience, his charms are as undeniable as they are ineffable. I never thought a Hollywood megastar would be the first person I'd tell my full story to, but he was, and not just because he's a captive audience. There's something about him that opens me up, like the moon shining on a night-blooming flower. If he were still alive, body and all, I wonder if I would feel the same way. Would I be too intimidated by his looks? Would his charisma be too strong? But this is the form I have him in, and it's the right shape for me. I take a long pull from my whiskey sour and set the glass back down on the custom-built wooden console in the armrest. When the movie resumes, Crag Dynamite is hurling a javelin. Where did he even get a javelin? Into the spokes of an enemy dirt bike, muscles bulging with every movement. These movies are ridiculous, Roland, I tell him, and then, almost unwittingly, I add, but you look incredible in them. Roland falls quiet, and I wonder if I've overstepped. The alcohol could be making me braver than usual. This is higher proof stuff than the cheap liquor I'm used to. Anxiously, I slide the maraschino cherry off the toothpick into my drink. Well, thank you, Adam. My trainer would be proud to hear you say that. I should stop there, but I don't. Yeah, I noticed that money shot of your bicep gripping the tank hatch. I worked harder on perfecting that pull-up than I did on any of my lines. It shows, I chuckle, on both counts. Roland laughs that euphoric laugh of his again, but when he speaks next, there's a different tenor to his voice. He sounds almost sheepish. Adam, he asks. Yeah? Would you mind taking another sip of your drink for me? It's the first time he's asked for something like this so directly. I had chalked up his interest to some kind of second-hand enjoyment born out of limitation, like watching the Food Network from a hospital bed. The way he's asking now makes it sound deeper and much less innocent, flirtatious even, like he's also nervous about crossing a line. I find the thought thrilling, but in case I'm misreading him, I don't want to say too much. I don't mind, I tell him, picking up the whiskey sour again. It's just, Roland interrupts. I stop with the glass halfway to my mouth. What is it? I've been embarrassed to tell you this, but I look down to check the battery notification light on the speaker. It's still green. Roland's just taking a moment to respond. I can feel joy again when you eat or drink. My day-to-day is pretty humdrum, but when you do that, it sets off something incredible in me. Fireworks, I guess I'd call them. It feels amazing. And when you're dead, amazing is hard to come by. Is he saying it turns him on? He didn't use those exact words, but that seems to be what he's hinting at. On one hand, I can't believe my luck. People's sexiest man alive several times over gets aroused when I eat a cheeseburger. Where was that luck in my dating life up to now? On the other hand, it does recontextualize much of what's happened between us so far. Roland sending me to get food whenever he gets frustrated in an interview suddenly makes a lot more sense. Was he masturbating through me to blow off steam? Hell, I should have been gratifying myself more in that case instead of spending every free second working. But I don't feel retroactively violated. If I'm honest, it actually turns me on to think of Roland as a silent voyeur all this time, with me as his unwitting accomplice, him getting off while I lick the last bit of ice cream off a spoon. It's enough to make me wish it could still be a secret. Adam, please say something, man, Roland says, awaiting my reaction. I'm dying here. Well, you know what I mean. You feel joy? I ask suggestively. Come on, don't make me say it, Roland says, sounding antsy now. This is new for me. That confirms it's sexual for him, but his phrasing also opens more questions. Has Roland Rogers, one of the most desired men in the world, had sex? I was certain he must have at some point, given his status, but I'm realizing now he's never outright told me about any encounters. His relationship with Zoya was apparently entirely platonic, he claimed the other day, after some prodding. And he's been insistent that he never actually did anything with a guy, despite harboring plenty of crushes in the closet. This might not be new for Roland, just in the sense that he's disembodied. It may be new for him altogether. And then there's the mechanics of how any of this even works. I mean, I guess it makes sense as much as any of this makes sense, I tell him, piecing together my initial theory out loud. The brain has electrical impulses, right? So maybe when I eat it, but Roland's not interested in my armchair physiology. I don't really care how it works, Adam, he interrupts. Can you just sip the fucking drink, please? I look at the screen. A shirtless Crag Dynamite is punching a hole through the hood of a moving car so he can rip out its engine by hand. Roland's chiseled abs are glistening under the Latvian sun. His ice blue eyes are filled with steely determination. And yet, as hot as he is, you can take it all away, and he's still him with all his magnetism and his vanities. I don't know how this will change things. Are we having some tipsy fun? Does Roland like me? How much or how little should I read into his request, which only seems to grow urgent the longer I spend thinking about it? I don't have answers right now, but I don't need them. Only a few times in my life have I stopped analyzing everything and simply acted. I want so badly for this to be one of them. I want to give Roland the joy he's looking for, the joy he's maybe never had. Oh, I'll sip my drink, I tell him. But first, I tilt my glass to the side so I can retrieve the liquor-soaked cherry with my free hand. Its smooth, lacquered surface catches a stray beam of light from the projector behind us. Smiling, I lift it to my lips. Roland. Adam puts the cherry in his mouth, and Cary Grant is fucking me behind the tree in the cemetery from Arsenic and Old Lace. You better get used to it, he's yelling, but in a hot way, as my hands grip the thick bark for support. There's a tombstone to the side of the tree, but instead of having a person's name engraved on it, it just reads, hell yeah. The world around me may be black and white, but everything I feel inside is vivid color. Mortimer, I call out, but Cary is too focused to respond. He wants to do this right and thoroughly, and all I have to do is let it happen. Thanks. That was worth a lot of exposition, I hope. That was maybe the most fun part.
I'm really glad you chose that excerpt. Your mind. Samantha Allen. How?
I watch a lot of television.
I mean, I have to be honest, most of my questions are like, how? Like, how did you come up with this? But I mean, I think despite all of the exposition you already gave, there is also so much more to this book. Like, it's an extremely layered book with these very deep, multiple kind of woven threads throughout this kind of like juicy, pulpy, hilarious writing. And it kind of talks about, you know, Hollywood and fame, but also like mortality and religion and God and love and queerness and also, but also like art making. And there's so, yeah, I just round of applause for your mind. But so you started talking about this at the beginning, but I want to hear more about like how you came up with this concept and what was kind of I'm assuming it evolved over time because it is so layered, I imagine. What was like the kernel that started it, and like, and then how did it evolve?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it comes from, you know, like working with celebrities at the day job at which you supervise me.
Samantha edits all of our cover stories and writes some of them.
I profiled Renee Rapp this year, and so like you have these interactions where it's like you get 45 minutes of this person's time. And they, you know, will be very gracious about the conversation. They'll acknowledge you and they'll say something kind to you if they see you at an event later. But largely, they're doing a gazillion interviews. And meanwhile, you go back to your little like laboratory and you spend like 2 to 3 weeks like perfecting this and like thinking and obsessing about this person and how to describe them and how to present them and how the photograph should be laid out. And that power dynamic has like always been kind of interesting to me. Like I often feel like the little like behind the scenes gremlin, you know? And so, yeah, a lot of it was kind of coming from, yeah, like what would it be like to be, you know, the gremlin? And what would it be like if someone of Renee Rapp's tier was forced to just kind of be in the same house as the gremlin for a month? What would we talk about? You know, where would we find common ground? Where would we make fun of each other? You know, that kind of thing. And a lot of the book too came from like, you know, me pivoting from doing a book like Real Queer America to writing Patricia Wants to Cuddle, because Adam, you know, broke out with this memoir, Salt Lake City Sodomite, and he's kind of been languishing longer than I languished between Real Queer America and Patricia Wants to Cuddle for dramatic effect. But yeah, those were sort of the originating feelings. And then I had good thematic reasons for making Roland a ghost, but I have to be really honest here. He started out as a ghost because the most annoying thing about writing Patricia Wants to Cuddle is you have all these characters and they all have to walk or run or like tiptoe. And I was like, I don't want to describe what anyone's feet are doing in a book. And so I was like, that's where, yeah. And then I found good thematic reasons for him to be dead. But and also, you just ended up having to explain all the ghost rules in the book anyway. So he might as well have had to like walk by the end of it. I'm saying I didn't get myself out of
Right, you're kind of then constantly
work.
Describing like what electronic device he's inhabiting and stuff like that.
But his movement is just flow.
It's true.
He just gets one verb for moving, and it's flow.
One of the interesting implications of it too is that you kind of get this like Love is Blind effect where it's like these, because there's no physical interaction, it's like these two people who would maybe never kind of typically have a sexual relationship potentially.
But like Roland still acts hot is the thing, you know?
Roland definitely acts hot. I mean, as you could hear.
And that was interesting to explore too, like from Roland's perspective, because there are moments in the book where he's like, if I had access, if I could flash my smile right now, like this would be a lot easier, or like that kind of thing. So he's a little frustrated that he no longer,
It's funny that the cover story thing was like a inspiration for you, because part of the book that cracked me up is that the writer in the book, essentially the premise is that he has a month to write this whole memoir, and he's like just doing it successfully, and he's just up all night like writing. And I was like, that is so Samantha. Because literally Samantha at one point took a week off work, and I was like, oh, what did you do on your vacation? And she was like, I wrote a novel. And I was like, cool. And I was like, oh, Samantha's logic brain is that like writing a memoir in 1 month is that's like such a reasonable deadline. But I just had to roast you a little bit about that.
Thank you.
But another why question.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's so many tropes about ghosts and how ghosts move. I haven't super encountered this idea of like a ghost inhabiting, jumping from one electronic device to another. How did you come up with that?
There were a couple of cinematic inspirations. One is her. And the other, gosh, I forget what it's called. It was this straight-to-VOD horror movie where there was like a malevolent AI controlling a smart house, and it could like kill people. I think it was Margot or something. And it could like someone got in the massage chair and it could like kill them with the massage chair or whatever. And I was like, what if that concept were used for good? What if like a ghost could like give someone a nice back rub in an armchair? So that was kind of in a blender, but I was kind of interested in like creating my own little ghost rules, you know. I'm not like a huge consumer of ghost media myself, and I like to keep my brain unsullied by other things in the genre when I'm working, so that what I create feels like a way you've maybe never seen a ghost before. I think my editor back there said that it was very, very millennial for me to have created like a ghost that's like an invisible ball that can send emails or something like that. Which
that also feels very Samantha Allen.
Yeah.
Outside of the ghost aspect of it, were there other books and films that you looked to as inspiration for this?
Yeah, I would say music and lyrics. The Hugh Grant rom-com is a major inspo. Hugh Grant plays an aging 80s pop star who gets like a chance out of nowhere to revitalize his career by writing a song for a pop star played by Haley Bennett, named Cora. And what I loved about that movie is, it came after the glut of Hugh Grant rom-coms where he's like the young, charming guy. He's still charming in it, but he's like, he's dealing with midlife questions. He like pops his hip at one point and like, and the kinds of conversations he has about his life are like informed by that perspective. And yeah, as a 37, soon to be 38-year-old, I think a lot about the middle of life these days more than I think about, I don't know, coming of age or that kind of thing. And so, yeah, that was kind of another big inspiration for Roland, where you have a 39-year-old writer and a 50-year-old movie star, and they're both, for obvious reasons, thinking a lot about death and dying and whether they've accomplished what they want to in their life and what it even means to still be alive, after your formative years are behind you.
Yeah, it becomes very existential in that way. And then it goes from that to like these food sex scenes kind of back and forth, which is amazing.
It might work altogether. You'll have to all decide.
I think it does. It's a good balance.
I mean, with Roland or with Patricia, I really am just kind of like putting a lot of things I'm thinking or feeling into like a blender,
Yeah.
And Roland is like, there's ex-Mormon trauma in there. There's, anxiety about death in there. There's thoughts about, being a working author in there. And I like to, it's not fun to like live in my head on like just a personal level. Like I spend a lot of time just like playing the video game Elden Ring, as you know, like trying to not think about the fact that I'm going to die. So when I write, I like try to make it fun to go along with me on that journey by like, here's ghosts, here's Bigfoot, here's food sex, and now it's fun for you to read about existential feelings instead of really sad.
It is fun.
I'm glad.
Yeah, I mean, I think, knowing you, as I was reading the character of Adam, the main character, the writer, who is like you, an ex-Mormon, and kind of had this big, very serious, like, first book, and is, of course, a writer, I was kind of curious, how much of this feels a little bit autobiographical in certain ways for Samantha.
I'd clock the percentage at like, of Adam's biography at like 70%. He's a little older than me, and I've made him he's kind of fussier than me a little. His ex-Mormon like feelings are a little fresher and a little like stronger still. I can still get there, but like, yeah, and he's just a little more finicky and a little more like bothered by like little things. Like he gets a little with like Roland, like in a way that I probably wouldn't. I would just like pliantly sit there and try to write this memoir and take the money. But I think the emotional core kind of goes past the biographical details and is about really like, often, and this is fortunately changing more as time goes on, but like often as a marginalized author, like you feel like, oh, the way into the industry is to like tell my personal story and to like perform my trauma. And then you're like, hey, I also have this fun story about a Bigfoot that is going around, terrorizing a reality dating show. And people are like, that's very nice, thank you. And Patricia was lucky enough to find a great home at Zando, which also published Roland. But there was a long, dark night of the soul there where I was kind of like, oh, did people just want to hear about me like being trans and living in the South, And Adam similarly has this feeling of like, was my writing even good? Was like, do people care about my work, or did they just like that like I was the gay ex-Mormon during Prop 8. Like, I was the one on Rachel Maddow at that time. So
Right.
he feels like he has something to prove to the world through Roland's memoir. And Roland, meanwhile, has a very clear and strong idea of what his memoir should be. And maybe those things don't mesh at the start. Yeah.
Yeah, the way that the Mormonism and the kind of like anxieties about what sort of art you feel like one feels pressured to make, the way those two threads interact is, I think, to me, was one of the most interesting parts of the book. And yeah, I'm curious, kind of, I don't know, I felt like there was a real also like meta commentary about the ways that stories about Mormonism kind of get told, and like the lack of kind of nuance in these narratives about like wanting to quote unquote like escape a religion, and how it kind of has to feel super tokenized and kind of overly dramatic all the time.
Yeah, I mean, there are stories about me leaving Mormonism that I never told, despite having written a lot of memoir, because they felt too shameful or embarrassing or humiliating. And there are ways in which fictionalizing them and changing details and kind of like working them into Adam's biography felt like an easier way to like unburden those things, you know, because like a lot of what Adam is feeling is like, oh, you know, and this is similar with like trans narratives too. It's like, oh, I have to package it up super neatly. I have to make it seem like really discreet and understandable. You know, and I was a chrysalis, and then I was a butterfly, and then I flew away, and we don't need to talk about anything else, you know. And similar with like leaving a religion narratives. It's like, oh, I felt oppressed by it, and then I took a principled stand, and then I left, and now I'm thriving. And Adam doesn't feel like he's thriving, and his journey out of the faith was more complicated than he let on. And so, yeah, I was interested in kind of like, yeah, using it to atone for my own kind of neoliberal packaging of my past self. Yeah.
We forgive you.
Thank you.
What was I gonna ask now? I had something that I was gonna say right after this. Oh, right. I want to dig more into like the book and the characters, but I also want to kind of prod you a little bit more about your own feelings, like your own journey as far as your work, because there are so many kind of intense back and forths in the book about, again, like feeling the need to write these, you know, kind of politically important books, and then kind of, I don't want to give anything away, but a potential like release to feel like actually I can just write things that are entertaining and enjoyable. And like, as you mentioned, kind of having had your initial book and then going on to write something so fun as, you know, a pulpy novel about a writer who falls in love with a ghost. Like, how did you kind of get to that point?
It was a while. It was a while, and you know, coming from journalism, it's like you feel like everything you write has to have like a purpose, so like it has to. And it was actually kind of early on. I was working on this little like thing for, I was working on something, and an editor at one point, I was like, why would people want to read this? Like, why, like, and she was like, well, people just like stories. Like, there doesn't need to be a bigger why. And that really stuck with me and resonated with me, because I'm very thesis driven in a lot of my writing, and a lot of writing fiction is about kind of learning to like abandon the thesis and let the story take you there. And, you know, maybe you make some points along the way, but the point is to entertain, enlighten, amuse, and not really to like deliver a lesson, you know? It kind of dovetails with coming out of Mormonism, where almost all the text you're reading has some kind of extra diegetic like purpose. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you let the story take you there. And you did actually end up making a lot of points along the way. Unexpected ones. And it just feels, extremely original is what I would say. But going back to the characters, so we talked about Adam. Say more about Roland, I thought it was so funny. So again, I hope I'm not giving away too much, but in the book, Roland has like a competitive kind of relationship with Leonardo DiCaprio and keeps like bringing up Leo and like and I thought it was an interesting choice to include all of these real life celebrities in the world, even though the main character is fictional. But yeah.
You haven't heard of Roland Rogers?
Uh-oh. But like, yeah, say more about like who, I mean, you said a bit, but like, who were you thinking about?
Yeah, I would say there's a lot of Roland Rogers that's like basically like what if George Clooney mysteriously started doing like Fast and the Furious in his 40s, you know? Because like he started on a hospital drama and then started doing movies. So I was kind of thinking Clooney in that aspect. And then, yeah, and then it was like he takes this left turn in his career and that kind of mystifies critics and that Adam is trying to get to the bottom of like, why did you just start doing all these like macho like action movies? Like what was going on internally for you that that's what you wanted to turn to? But yeah, with regards to like the Leo of it all, to me, a lot of like the world building is about like making Roland believable as like an A-lister. And to me, that was about kind of like blending real celebrities and fake celebrities. So like Roland has done a movie with Emily Blunt that like doesn't exist, or you know, obviously like Nick Nolte is in the Crash Street movies. And I think it just kind of helps like buy more that like Roland could be real in a parallel dimension or something like that. Yeah, I had fun with it. The problem is though, this is really deep 30 Rock lore, but like, it's like when a television show casts a celebrity as a guest star, and then it's like you can't mention that person again. So like, because Matt Damon played Liz Lemon's boyfriend, later they bring up a Matt Damon movie and they do like but who was the guy in that movie again? And it revealed that Matt Damon has been like erased from the 30 Rock universe. Like there is no Matt Damon in the world of 30 Rock. So those are things that I was thinking about with Roland.
Of course. And then this, I mean, this is going way back to the excerpt you read, but one of the most, speaking of originality, one of the most original aspects of the book and one of the most unexpected is the relationship to food. Where did that come from?
So, you know, like Freud has a theory of the libido that like, you know, it's a river and that, you know, if you constrain the river or block the river, it has to go somewhere else, you know? I don't know if that's what I totally believe about sexuality, but when I was a teenager, and this story is altered and kind of put in the context of Adam's mission, but I was me and a bunch of like the youth of the Mormon church were having dinner with this guy who had been kind of like newly converted. We were at some pizza place in Chatham, New Jersey, and he was a man of the world before his conversion to Mormonism. And he was eating this pizza with just incredible gusto. And he was like, and he didn't, you know, the conversation has changed in the book, but he said something to the effect of like, now that I'm Mormon, food has taken on a whole new meaning. And I was like, oh, interesting, you know. And I've thought about that for like 20 years now. And so, yeah, I liked this idea of like, well, Roland can't like have sex, but he could maybe as an electrical being, he could feel electrical pleasure. And yeah, that's not like all of where it's from. I have like a relationship with food, as many humans do, and complicated feelings about that relationship, just like Adam does. And so it was fun to like take this thing that Adam, you know, being kind of like a 39-year-old gay writer whose ex-boyfriend didn't think he was like fit enough or that kind of thing, to take someone who feels shame around his body and put him in this situation where eating could become like a site of pleasure and joy and like community with this movie star. I thought that was like a really fun way to play with it, and it was also just like fun to write it. I actually kind of like found it on the page, which was fun because I didn't like plan it in advance. I was just like, okay, well they're gonna need to eat lunch, and then I was like, wait, like there's something here.
First of all, we should find that man and send him a copy of this book. Also, I loved how specific the food was, and given that like the celebrities were real, I didn't know because I don't live in LA, if the dishes and restaurants you were mentioning besides In-N-Out were real.
Yeah, they're real. Yeah, including the Winchells in Culver City. So yeah,
I want to go on the Roland Rogers food tour.
I have not, of the food mentioned in Roland Rogers, I've had In-N-Out burger. I've had macaroons from Latterie. And that's like about it. A lot of the other stuff was, yeah, the Roland Rogers food tour.
Let's do it. Zando. Monetize this. I have one final question for you, if there's time, which is just, as a lesbian,
Yeah.
did you find it challenging at all to write a romance between two gay men?
You know, I don't know. The readers will have to tell me if I pulled it off or not. I've kind of found it fun after doing Patricia, which was such like a female-centric book with like 4 different perspectives from 4 very different women, to like do something that was like this more masculine energy. And the next book is going to have a non-binary protagonist, and that will complete my gender trilogy.
Thank you for your service.
This is the dark middle chapter of my gender trilogy. Yeah.
Amazing. We can't wait. We have some time for questions from the audience. There's one right here.
Hi. So I would love to know, I mean, I guess to both of you for this one, do you believe in ghosts? Because I've had a ghost experience and I'd love to know if other people believe in ghosts. And then if I may ask a follow-up question, I've played Elden Ring, and the point of Elden Ring I feel like is dying because there's no game over. So I'd love to know how that plays into your existentialness about dying.
Yeah.
I feel like people in the room heard it, but we are supposed to repeat the questions for them.
The question was about whether we believe in ghosts, and then about how the repetitive death cycle of the video game Elden Ring, published by Bandai Namco, intersects with my existential anxiety. You can't speak to the Elden Ring, so do you want to?
I believe in ghosts.
Cool. Me too.
Have you had a ghost experience?
No. But I, as you know, very controversially love Tyler Henry.
Yes. I want to believe in life after death. I sort of don't believe in ghosts or think that maybe if there is life after death, well, like, why would ghosts want to hang out here? Like,
So fair.
it kind of sucks.
Yeah.
Like,
They could have died and then got trapped in electronics.
yeah, true. I mean, if I were a ghost, I would want to go somewhere else for sure.
Fair.
Yeah, Earth 2024, not a great setting. Elden Ring, I think that for me, it's like, I just enjoy how difficult it is because it matches how difficult it feels to be alive. And so, and it provides you with this illusion that you can like conquer an unconquerable challenge. So I'm just gonna keep like playing it forever until my reaction times become too slow to beat it, and then I'm kind of like worried about like what happens to me mental health wise after that. Yeah.
Anyone else?
What would you say if there is one, is the through line across all three of your books that are out now, which I realize is a little tricky since one is nonfiction and two are fiction. But if there is one thing that you feel like kind of connects them all, I would love to hear about it.
I would say I'm pretty media obsessed, and Real Queer America, despite being nonfiction, its framing is largely like a response to like what I felt like was a media like misperception of LGBTQ life in conservative parts of the country. That's the only through line I could do through all three. Through the novels, it's definitely an interest in celebrity culture, alienation under late capitalism, and in ways that people kind of try to find connection. In Patricia, it kind of goes in a disturbing direction where someone sort of feels like they can touch something elemental and real in a very alienating, distanced world by kind of embracing horror. And in Roland, it goes a different direction where, you know, someone who is alienated finds connection and love through macaroons and hamburgers and stuff. But yeah, I'm very concerned and interested with what it feels like to be alone during a grim time, and how to make that like fun to read about. And so yeah. Oh, and the question for folks viewing on the live stream was about the through line between Real Queer America, Patricia Wants to Cuddle, and Roland Rogers Isn't Dead Yet. I apologize.
We've got two. You can go first.
Oh, me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I know that you mentioned 30 Rock as like some solid core, and that you're media obsessed. So I guess I'm just curious, like, what are your most influential TV movies that maybe led you to this point?
I have seen 30 Rock about like 7 times, I think. I would like watch it to like fall asleep, you know? Like, you ever put on a show that you've seen a gazillion times? 30 Rock definitely informs Roland Rogers for sure. I love like just referencing things, and yeah. 30 Rock, not quite as emotional as Roland Rogers Isn't Dead Yet though. Yeah, gosh, that's like the big one for me, honestly. I would say for Patricia, no, Yellow Jackets was coming out after I had finished the manuscript, but that was kind of an interesting like thematic resonance there, and that definitely lives inside me for sure. And music and lyrics was big for Roland, and I consume a ton of like romantic comedies, and so that all kind of like, some of that got thrown out the window with Roland, which has kind of unconventional pacing, but I'm definitely kind of like taking a lot of the same beats and plot points and reusing them. Yeah.
Oh, we'll go Anna first.
I have 2 questions. Sorry, they're short. The first one was just like, did you have a favorite line or scene or moment that just kind of clicked, that when you wrote it, you were like, this is it. That's it. And the second line is just like, how do you go about writing like from different perspectives? Because you do it with Patricia and you do it with Roland, and like, is that difficult? How do you find the balance? Do you enjoy writing from like different characters?
Yeah, okay, so the first question is about whether I had a favorite line. There's some deeper emotional ones, but the one that leaps to mind instantly is Adam commenting on Roland's gray plaster, like Kardashian style, like flooring. He says at one point, "When did rich people turn on carpet?" And that was one of those where I was like, self high five. You did it. I'm trying to think of a more interesting emotional line. Ooh, it was at the tip of my head. Gosh. I'll come back to it. The second question is about
Multiple character perspectives.
Yeah, how do you write multiple characters in multiple perspectives? It's tricky because you sound like you when you write, and so you have to kind of decide how. In this case, with Patricia, it was like a close third-person narration for each of the characters. So you have to decide like how close, how zoomed out. When do I get to have little moments of authorial distance where I maybe make fun of this character a little without it stepping so far back that you don't feel like you're in their head. But Patricia was fun because I just kind of had, you have your little character sheet for each one, and as you're writing, you're just making sure like this feels like an Amanda passage or this feels like a Vanessa passage, and you get to experiment with different moods and tones. Because Roland is 2 first-person perspectives alternating, which is kind of like daunting to write in. It's harder to like, in my experience, to like make it sound like different people when you're writing in first person. I tried to make Roland have a more limited vocabulary than Adam and speak a little more plainly, and for his emotional insights to be kind of like a little less nuanced at the start. And for Adam, he has kind of grad school sentences, and he's very anxious and overthinking everything. And Roland gains emotional intelligence as the book goes on, and Adam learns to relax a little bit. But yeah, it's hard is the answer. The next book will only have 1 perspective. So we've gone from 4 to 2 to 1, and I've promised that the next book after that will have 0.5 perspectives. I'm just gonna have it. Yeah.
Okay, I have 2 very quick ones. But the first one is was adaptation one of the things that informed you?
Oh my gosh, I love that movie. So the question is about whether the Nicolas Cage movie adaptation informed Roland Rogers Isn't Dead Yet. Adaptation, how many people have seen it? Okay, a fair bit. Well, only a few actually. Sorry, now that I count the hands in my head. Nicolas Cage plays, oh God. Charlie Kaufman, the real-life screenwriter, was assigned to adapt a book called The Orchid Thief by New Yorker journalist Susan Orlean. And Charlie Kaufman started adapting it and was like, I can't adapt this. This should be like a magazine article, not a movie. And the way that he decided to adapt it was to write a movie about his own struggle to adapt it. And he somehow gets enmeshed with Susan Orlean, with this orchid thief, all the while his own twin brother, played also by Nicolas Cage, who is not a real person, even though Charlie Kaufman is a real person, starts like getting involved too. Definitely an inspo. I would say that the dynamic between Charlie Kaufman and his brother is probably an inspiration, because Charlie Kaufman is like trying to create these works of tortured genius, and his brother is just a total amateur screenwriter who's just like, and what if the killer had multiple identities or whatever? And he like sells the movie for like $30 million. So I kind of, it's always fun to take someone like Adam, who's super anxious, and kind of juxtapose him with someone who's just kind of like unthinking and unserious. Yeah.
And then the second question that I had was, I feel like you come up with these like really rich names. I always am curious how people come up with like Roland Rogers. Like how long did you investigate, or like what kind of research did you do to come up with character names?
The question is about how I come up with character names. Adam Gallagher is combining some family names. Roland Rogers was all about the alliteration. I wanted it to sound kind of old-fashioned, but also like have a fun flow to it. And most importantly, I wanted it to have really good search engine optimization.
You're so smart.
SEO score. And the only Roland Rogers I could find is there's some elementary school in Pennsylvania named like Roland Rogers Elementary, but it's not like a famous person. It was just like someone important in that like local community or something like that. I mean, that's important too. It's important to be involved in your local communities. Yeah.
Samantha's real priorities. Come on. Thanks on behalf of everyone in this room for being so funny and cool and smart and here with us tonight, Samantha.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for talking to me.
so much for coming out tonight. Thank you to everyone who asked questions. Thank you, Sarah, for moderating such a great conversation. And thank you to Samantha for celebrating this launch with us. So, some final reminders before we wrap up. If you're still with us on the live stream, you can buy a copy by clicking the link in the live stream description. For those with us in person, if you haven't gotten a copy yet, we have plenty of additional copies available for purchase at the register where you checked in. We also have a few copies of Patricia Wants to Cuddle, which if you haven't read yet, you will have to buy it. So I highly recommend checking those out. Samantha will be around to sign and personalize your books. That's happening right where my coworker Tiff is pointing to. Beautiful pointing, you guys. So we're gonna ask that you all just sit tight for a minute. We're gonna get Samantha settled back there. Then please make sure to grab all of your personal belongings with you so that we can start to break down and rearrange the space. Feel free to line up down the center aisle, curve around to the wall, and get your book signed. That's all for tonight. Let's give these two one last round of applause.